Hello again from Linz, Austria. I'm Graham Buck, a member of the team at Treasury Management International, or TMI. I'm here at the 2022 Tech Day being held by the Austrian Corporate Treasury Association, or ACTA. And I'm here with Erich Stark of PwC. Erich has just given a very comprehensive presentation on cash management. Erich, I guess PwC, more than perhaps any other organisation, has taken the pulse of corporate treasury over the last few years through its various surveys. What trends have you been detecting perhaps in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think what we see is that naturally treasury technology is developing day by day and at a very fast pace. In some spheres, such as payments, it was even increased in speed, if you will, by COVID. At the same time, some of the headline names aren't really there where you see great or fantastic or ready-to-go use cases. So I think it's a mixed bag, if you will.
Your presentation described the metamorphosis of payments traffic in the digital age and the influence of the banks, the regulators and the IT companies. Have they all had perhaps an equal influence?
I think regulators are usually, depending on where you start the timeline, in many cases at the start, because then the rest of the market needs to abide by regulations and sort of develops and optimizes within everything that's allowed or possible. So I think one of the last ones was PSD2, for example, which as far as I know is under review at present, or the review should be coming to an end soon, I think. And that caused these floodgates to open in terms of API, fintechs, open banking, which have been beneficial. At the same time, as mentioned in our presentation earlier, the lack of standardization is a bit of a drawback if you're thinking about using it in a standardized and global way.
Has there been perhaps a bit more cooperation between the industry and the regulators, so there aren't these unintended consequences that we've seen in the past? Yeah,
I think there is naturally the mechanism. Anyone can give feedback to any regulation, but I think the regulators naturally have certain incentives and interests of their own, usually driven by global political or governmental targets. That in some cases naturally don't really fully align, let's put it that way, with individual corporations who have their own sets of goals and targets. I think what I can remember when EMIR came way back when, ages ago now, caused by derivative positions, mostly in banks. Corporates were hit by almost a tsunami where they had to adjust systems and everything. At the same time, then I think the regulator over time rolled back some of it for these corporations because they weren't really targets. So potentially similar to that, we'll see either an increase in standardization or potentially adjustments and fine-tuning in this review, for example, of PSD2.
Your presentation mentioned the increasing focus on real-time or instant payments, and that in turn a move towards instant treasury. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting components is that, as mentioned, part of that is driven by the consumer side. So this user experience argument, everyone, smartphones, various payment mechanisms in the retail or end consumer space, where you just pay peer-to-peer or to your merchant or vendor instantly. It's deducted from your account and it reaches the vendor instantly. That sort of seeps through to the corporation that's on the receiving end of many of these payments. And then you need to sort of figure out what to do with cash flowing in instantly. At the same time, as mentioned, for fundamentally sort of large-scale rollout of instant payments in treasury use cases for large corporations, the limits, for example, in SEPA, in terms of the maximum amount are still a hindrance to fully make it a widespread use case.
And you also touched on the work towards standardization of APIs and SWIFT's involvement in that. How's that progressing and how much still needs to be done?
Yeah, I think you might have to ask SWIFT colleagues on that one. No, but I think we saw a very interesting presentation by Swift themselves. And so that's a topic I wanted to pick up on, because these fragmented, non-standardized APIs, when you're thinking about large treasuries who don't really have to link up to one bank or one vendor or one payment provider for these digital wallets, then it becomes very cumbersome. You need to initiate, implement, and then maintain a various set of different interfaces, and that's cost and time consuming. So from that point of view, I think initiatives such as standardizing APIs could be sort of a win-win, where you say, okay, I have the openness, data is freely available, but at the same time I'm saving costs and time by not having to accommodate every different type.
And lastly, what has just quite recently emerged onto the radar is the energy crisis, the huge spike in power costs and supply issues. Any thoughts on what that's going to mean for cash management?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the course of the last year is in many discussions. So I used to work at a utility in Austria, and I'm still in touch with colleagues. And so from the local scene across Austria speaking, I've had a bunch of discussions, not only recently where it sort of hit peaks, about the increased demands on liquidity and liquidity management caused by margin calls. And I think the main shift over the last few months has been that on the one hand, the wild fluctuations in energy prices have led to even greater swings in margins, even greater liquidity, volatility and risk. At the same time, with the interest rates shifting from negative, so you were happy to not have cash in your account if you were cash rich, to positive rates, and then now even increasing substantially.
I think the speed with which
it's sort of a double whammy, or a perfect storm, where now cash costs money and the fluctuations and margins can be substantially higher than only a few months or years ago. And in terms of sort of the energy markets and what it does in the macro sense, I'm not really the expert, but at the same time, what you hear and read is pretty substantial. We're heading into winter with potential production shutdowns due to costs for certain commodities and or availability even. And so I think that's at the very top of the regulatory agenda right now as we speak right here.
And any other issues that are currently keeping treasurers awake at night?
Yeah, I think the oldie but the goodie. So we had it in our talk, cash forecasting. It's been here for years and it's still going on, and there are developments, but I think we haven't seen the perfect solution yet due to the various data sources that flow into the question. Not even just ERP, but systems before the ERP, so interfacing toward clients and customers.
Great. Yeah. Erich, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to get your thoughts, and congratulations on an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to know more about cash management, of course, get in touch with ACTA and also PwC. Thank you again, Erich.
Thank you.